Thanks.
Hey everyone, I'm Janet B, recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. Nice to be back here. I have missed 4 weeks. I was sick for 2 weeks, and then I was across the pond in Europe for 2 weeks. So it is really good to be back with y'all tonight. And tonight I'm going to talk about pride. And there's going to be stuff not from the big book, not from the 12 and 12. But again, as Melissa said, we're not part of OA, so we're not bound to stick to any kind of approved literature. But I know a big part of our working the steps is dealing with our character defects, right? And a character defect that I think a lot of us have run up against, I certainly have, is the defect of pride. So I did some research on it once, and this is my research paper. So it starts with Big Book on page 62 says, right, that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our troubles. And it continues on page 116. Pride is one of the ingredients that goes into making up the self-centered life. And then if we looked in the AA 12 and 12, it says, gaining greater humility is the foundation principle of each of Alcoholics Anonymous's 12 steps. So they're saying that like getting rid of pride and growing in humility is the purpose of every single one of the steps. And why? Like, why is that so important, right? I just came in here for the magic food plan. And they tell us without humility, we can't stay sober or for us abstinent. And then in the 12 and 12, they go on to say it's not enough to just get abstinent, to just get sober, that unless we develop a lot more of this precious quality of humility than is required to stay sober or abstinent, we won't be happy, we won't be useful, and we can't summon the faith we need in order to deal with adversity. So, in other words, pride actually blocks faith. And that makes sense. If I think I've got it all together and I know everything, I won't think that I need God and I won't even look for him. So let's dive in. So, a couple definitions. Pride, a high esteem of oneself for some real or imaginary merit or superiority. And that's from Sam Shoemaker, who was a spiritual advisor to Bill Wilson. Pride, a high esteem of oneself for some real or imaginary merit or superiority. And I looked at the definition of humility, and there's lots of definitions, but here's one, and I don't know where I got it. Maybe the dictionary, maybe I heard someone say it. Humility is a low view of one's own importance. And I really love that because it doesn't say a low view of my worth, right? Like, it's different, but of my own importance. Basically, humility is saying the world can keep turning without me. But pride. So again, in my research, I identified 12 different types of pride. So I'm going to go through those and then some of the antidotes that I've discovered, not always applied successfully, but I'm working on it. Number one type of pride, showing off, caring what other people think. When, when we want other people to see what we have, our clothes, our cars, anything like that, we're silently bragging, even a specific talent. It can manifest in things we give our children, right? We want our children to go to a certain college, wear certain sneakers because we care what other people think. And here's a quote from Tim Keller in the book, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person. We say that people are proud of being rich or clever or good looking, but they are not. They are proud of being richer or cleverer or better looking than the next person. If everyone else became equally rich, clever, and good looking, there'd be nothing to be proud of. Number two, not caring at all what other people think. So if we don't care for the right reason because we really care what God thinks about us, well, that's great, but that's not what they're talking about. This is from C.S. Lewis. The diabolical pride comes when you look down on others so much that you don't care what they think of you. If you say, why should I care for the applause of that rabble, as if their opinion was worth anything, right? Like, I'm so good, it doesn't matter what anyone says about me. Dangerous. Number three, pride of affiliation. Okay. So my company that I work for does the websites for some of the websites for the NFL. Okay, I could say that in a way that like makes me really special, right? Like my company does work for the NFL. Not me. They don't let me near a customer. I'm like all back end. But when we talk about what our company does, as if that makes us special, or pride in what my family does, like my ancestor was on the Mayflower, or children, like my son was the goalie of the school soccer team. Okay, great for him, but it doesn't make me anything special. This is from Sam Shoemaker. When we have this kind of pride, the pride of affiliation, we expect to be deferred to, not for any moral or intellectual distinction in ourselves, but because we're related to somebody who did something good. Number four, pride in our accomplishments. That's pride in my IQ, my talents, anything like that. It's okay to have self-esteem, but I always need to recognize that anything that I have is a gift from God. If I have a gift from speaking, which some of you might debate, it's because God gave me that gift. And then I always have to remember that there are plenty of gifts that He didn't give me and that other people have, and that's okay. It's another quote I liked. Success isn't measured by how well I'm doing compared to another person. It's measured by how well I'm doing compared to what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay. Number five, spiritual pride. Sam Shoemaker says this is the most deadly form of pride. It's to say, I'm bad, but I'm not as bad as that person. Comparing ourselves to other people, and we may be bad, but we can always find someone who's worse. If you think about it, during World War II, all the people in France were emaciated. It was normal, but it wasn't healthy. So I can't compare myself to a group of other people and say, well, I'm better than them. I mean, they all may be bank robbing murderers, right? So if I'm better than them, I'm not really saying anything. But am I living up to what God wants me to do? That's what I need to do. Number six, pride of a spiritual influencer. So if a person only hears about how much he or she helps others, he can relapse into a pride strong enough to kill everything genuinely spiritual in his life. So sponsoring definitely helps protect against this because there will always be failures that keep us humble. No matter how good of a speaker or a sponsor someone is, no one sponsors people and gets 100% of them through the steps. It never happens. And so it's really helpful. But what's more helpful is anytime a sponsee drops, instead of just saying, oh, she wasn't willing to go to any lengths, we do an honest 10 step and look to see if we had a part. Did I push too much? Did I not push enough? Did I not give enough time? Was my brain somewhere else so that I wasn't able to see a potential pitfall she had? It's really good when we're sponsoring people and it doesn't work out for us as sponsors to analyze if we've done something wrong. Number seven, self-reliance. What a big one. The big book says that we have fear because self-reliance fails us. Self-reliance is thinking like, I don't need God, that I can handle it myself. And I had a little example of this yesterday. So my husband and I had tickets to a play, but he had a horrible migraine on Saturday. Wasn't sure he'd make it. I left for church Sunday morning. He was still sleeping. And I'm thinking, okay, like I need to know because if we're going to sell these tickets, the show's at 1 o'clock. So right as I'm getting into church, my husband texts me and he says, um, we should probably try to sell the tickets. But I'm in church now. So I observe the Sabbath. Like I don't go grocery shopping on Sundays. I don't work on Sundays. I don't transact any business, no online shopping, nothing. But you better believe the second I got that text, I'm sitting there in church listing my tickets for sale. And then after, I'm like, Janet, what did you do? And I realized, of course, self-reliance, but what was the basis of it? The basis of it wasn't trusting God. That if I waited until after I got out of the church service, like an hour and a quarter later, that if God wanted those tickets to be sold, they would be sold without me violating my own values in order to get what I want done. So, what did I do? I just repented. God, I'm sorry. I was running on self will. Please forgive me. And by the way, I got home. The tickets had not sold. My husband said he was feeling better, and we ended up going to the show anyway. But a big lesson for me, thinking like in church, I'm sitting there running on self will. So hopefully I will not repeat that. Other ways of self reliance. If I don't make time to pray and meditate, if I meditate without having a pen and paper in front of me, it means either I'm thinking God's not going to show up, and then where's my step two? Or I'm thinking that what God has to say to me isn't important enough to write it down to make sure I remember it. When I was, gosh, probably in my 20s, 30s, when I was young, had a job and my boss called me into his office and I didn't bring a notepad. And he's like, you should bring something, a notepad to write down what I'm going to tell you. If I have to do that for a boss, surely I have to do that for God, right? So I have my pen and my journal when I meditate. Spiritual pride is the illusion that we're competent to run our own lives, achieve our own sense of self-worth, and find a purpose big enough to give us meaning in life without God. Number 8, jealousy. It's really a form of pride because it's really me telling God that the way he's distributed gifts is unfair, that he's given someone else more than he's given me, right? And I remember a time I was struggling to get pregnant, and a friend of mine already had 2 children, and she came over and she was pregnant again, and she said she was afraid to tell me. And I remember that time I was doing a little better than I did yesterday in church. And I said, that's fine. It's not like God has a finite number of babies to give out. And if you get one, then that means I can't. And a good thing to do if we're feeling jealous is to do something good for that person we're feeling jealous of. It's real good for our humility. Number 9, hypersensitivity. That is such pride. It's me thinking like I'm queen of the world and how dare anyone talk to me that way. Me telling people that the way they're talking to me is wrong. Page 125 of the big book. We alcoholics are sensitive people. It takes some of us a long time to outgrow that serious handicap. That's like not liking anyone telling me I've done something wrong. Oh, I have in parentheses something. Um, well, okay. So my son had left, I guess, a cup of coffee. This was back when he was in high school in the living room. And it got all moldy. So I didn't like it. And I just put it in his room. And he said to me, like, Mom, like, basically, what are you doing? Couldn't you just told me to put it in the sink? You didn't have to do that. And it's like, no, you can't tell me what to, but it's like, yeah, I can be told what to do, even by my kid. Now, again, not that they can boss me around, but if they've got some constructive criticism, I can listen. Being hypersensitive is actually a subtle form of manipulation. It makes people walk on eggshells around us because they're afraid to ruffle our feathers. And we certainly do not want to be the kind of sponsee who does that. So that then our sponsors are afraid to say anything because they're afraid we're going to cry. We don't want to do that because then we won't get the help we need. Fortunately, I have a sponsor who's not the least bit impressed with me. She loves me, but if she's got something to say, she will say it. And if I don't like it, I just bite my lip and say, "Okay, I'll think about it." And sometimes she's right and sometimes she's wrong, but I always try to think about it. Number 10, unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is me forgetting how much God has forgiven me and thinking I'm entitled to life where everything goes my way, or at the very least is fair. And I talked about this Thursday. I had something where I was really entitled to be angry this past week. So I was coming home from Europe and I was up 24, 25 hours straight with just like a 30-minute nap in there. And we fly this long flight, 10 hours from Switzerland to Atlanta. And we get in at 2:30 and our connection is at 7:30. But we get through customs and everything really early. So it's 3:30 and we're free. And I look and I see, oh, there's a flight at 5:30. We can get home 2 hours earlier. So I go to the airline counter. Not even going to say which airline it was. And I said, "Can you put us on the 5:30 flight?" And she says, "Well, no, because from that flight, your luggage was already going on the 7:30 flight." So it's like, okay, I'll sit down and watch American Idol, which I believe it or not, you cannot access over in Europe. So I had an episode or two to catch up on. I'm watching my show, trying to keep my eyes open. We get on the 7:30 flight, we get home, and our luggage isn't on the carousel. So I checked the app and it said our luggage had been put on the 5:30 flight. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, you know what? Everything goes through the hand of God. I'm not going to get mad at the airline. I'm just going to say, like, it's okay. I've inconvenienced people. It is okay if I'm inconvenienced. And, that goes for having to deal with insurance companies, right? Who never get it right. Having to deal with like the phone company, having to deal with, just like all the airlines who like don't get you on a flight 2 hours earlier when they could have and should have. It's all okay. And we can forgive. Remember, I love how Melissa says it. Fairness is not my code anymore. Love and tolerance is my code. That's what the big book says. So fairness is not my code. Love and tolerance is. Remember, we've entered the world of the spirit. So again, when my son, if he would raise his voice at me, which he did a lot when he was in high school, my job was to discipline, but still forgive. Anytime I stayed angry was because of my pride. How dare someone talk to me that way? How dare the airline, make that kind of mistake? How dare it rain when I want it to be sunny? And life is so much easier when we realize we have to forgive. And then just moving on to the next one, number 11, entitlement. And again, life is easier when we realize I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not entitled to make sure I have time at the pool on a warm day. This was back when I lived in New Jersey and we only had 3 months of warm days. Now I have a lot of warm days here. But just realizing we're not entitled. I'm not entitled to kids who go to church once they leave my house. I'm not entitled to a long life. I'm not entitled to perfect health. Recently, I get my blood sugar tested regularly, and now, according to Medicare guidelines, I've like crossed the line and I'm officially diabetic. I eat super healthy. I'm at a good body weight. My parents both had diabetes. I hit the genetic jackpot, I guess. I'm not entitled to perfect health with no health problems. And there is always someone worse off than me. I had, I knew someone who was a recovered alcoholic, and, you know, he just taught me that, we're entitled to nothing. I'm entitled to nothing. Number 12, criticizing, thinking I'm better than others. So don't we all do that? The AA 12 and 12 says gossip barbed with anger is a polite form of murder by character assassination. Here we're not trying to help those we criticize. We're trying to proclaim our own righteousness. So if I'm ever critical of someone, I should think, would I say this to them if they were right here? Criticism is often pride. I can criticize you because I'm better than you. So, how do we get over it? What are some antidotes? Something that seems like an antidote but isn't. Telling myself I'm not really fill in the blank, not that smart, not that pretty, not that helpful. C.S. Lewis says, by this method, thousands of humans have been brought to think that humility means pretty women trying to believe that they are ugly and clever men trying to believe that they are fools. And since what they are trying to believe may in some cases be nonsense, they cannot succeed in believing it, and their minds are endlessly revolving on themselves. So, real antidotes. Thinking of others. This is from the book, The Freedom of Self Forgetfulness. The thing we would remember from meeting a truly humble person is how much they seem to be totally interested in us. Because the essence of humility is not thinking more of myself or thinking less of myself, it's thinking of myself less. In the big book, page 70, it says, if sex is troublesome, and remember, they say we treat sex problems the same as any other problem. If sex is troublesome or anything is troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. It takes us out of ourselves. Again, C.S. Lewis says, if you meet a really humble person, probably all you'll think about him is that he seemed a cheerful, intelligent chap who took a real interest in what you said to him. Second antidote is to realize that I have pride. To acquire humility, the first step is to realize that one is proud. Nothing whatever can be done before that. If you think you're not conceited, it means you're very conceited indeed. And then because I have the big book, I can do the steps on it. I can admit I've been prideful. I can ask God to help me. I can inventory it to see like the different manifestations of pride in my life, ask God to remove it, make any amends, and practice the opposite. So, how do I practice the opposite? If I'm jealous, I do something for the person I'm jealous of. There was a time when I wanted to be noticed for wearing the nicest clothes. I made a point of wearing ordinary clothes for a while. I wanted to be seen as the smartest in class. I made a point of only raising my hand one time per class. And most important, I can practice gratitude. Sam Shoemaker says the antidote for pride is not humility, but gratitude. Humility is still struggling with one's own attitude. Gratitude has found something without, in the presence of which to forget oneself and bow down in thankfulness. Pride may hide unseen in humility, but not in thankfulness. The thankfulness should not be what God has done through me, because then I still may be marveling at myself. Like if I say, God, thank you for the great talk on pride that you did through me. I'm marveling at myself. I should be marveling at what God has done for me, removing my food obsession, restoring relationships with my kids. I mean, my son and I used to battle so much that he went to live with a friend for 6 weeks because I told him, get out of the house. I thought he'd go down the block for half an hour, come back with his tail between his legs and say, I'm sorry, Mom. He went to his best friend's house for 6 weeks. Um, but now we are restored. In 2 weeks, he graduates from infantry officer training in the military, and we are going down to Georgia proud, and he calls us all the time. And God did that, restored that relationship. Another thing we can do is be
Beautiful.
is be rigorous in our 10 steps. We don't want to make things seem better than they are. We don't want to make ourselves seem better than we are. If I find myself like I did this past yesterday in church, like, gosh, I was full of pride, I will call a spade and say, I was prideful, you know, that we admit it because it says, admit your faults to God and each other. Of course, God knows our faults. He knows when I'm prideful. But the mechanism he put in place to remove our character defects is to admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another person. Um, Another thing we can do is get to know God more. I find that more I get to know the awesomeness and bigness and wonder and majesticness of God, the less important I tend to be. And that is just fine. Because, it's like, I don't know, if you're a little kid and you're getting beat up by all these bullies, but then your big brother comes home and he's like 7 feet tall and he's walking with you all the time, not afraid anymore. The more we get to know God, the less important I have to be. And then, of course, there's always prayer. If you want, there's a litany of humility. I believe it's Catholic, but it's beautiful and talks about humility. So if, that's helpful to you, great. And here's a prayer that I have found. Lord, please do whatever it takes to diminish pride's power in my life. I still covet glory and honor, but I know I should serve without thought of getting credit. So hard. Make your selfless love for me so palpable and affecting that I don't care what others think. Lord, even as I pray for humility, I am prideful. All I can say is, Lord, be merciful to me, right? Because even as I'm praying for pride, I can say, gosh, look how good I am. I know enough to pray pray for my pride to be removed, and other people don't. And that's like, oh God, forgive me for that. Look at me. I'm even asking to be forgiven. And it can just go in an endless loop. And it's like, God, please remove it and just have mercy on me. Um, and, I always read a story when I do this, but I realized I read the story like 5 or 6 weeks ago when I did a talk on surrender because it fits both. So I was quickly like looking online to find another, touching story on humility that would be helpful. And I found some, and I didn't like any of them. I didn't think any of them were as good as this. So if you were here 5 or 6 weeks ago and you heard this, apologies, but I've read this story maybe a dozen times and I could read it a dozen more and because I need to learn what it says. Dominique, a lean, muscular 6'2" always wearing a navy blue beret, learned at age 54 he was dying of inoperable cancer. With his community's permission, he moved to a poor neighborhood in Paris and took a job as a night watchman at a factory. Returning home every morning at 8 a.m., he would go directly to a little park across the street from where he lived and sit down on a wooden bench. Hanging around the park were marginal people, drifters, winos, has-beens, dirty old men who leered at the girls passing by. Dominique never criticized, scolded, or reprimanded them. He laughed, told stories, shared his candy, accepted them just as they were. From living so long out of the inner sanctuary, he gave off a peace, a serene sense of self-possession, and hospitality of heart that caused cynical young men and defeated old men to gravitate toward him like bacon toward eggs. His simple witness lay in accepting others as they were without question and allowing them to make themselves at home in his heart. Dominique was the most non-judgmental person I have ever known. He loved with the heart of God. One day, when the ragtag group of rejects asked him to talk about himself, Dominique gave a thumbnail description of his life. He told them with quiet conviction that God loved them tenderly and stubbornly and came for rejects and outcasts just like them. His witness was credible because the word was enfleshed on his bones. Later, one old timer said, the dirty jokes, the vulgar language, the leering at girls just stopped. One morning, Dominique failed to appear on his park bench. The men grew concerned. A few hours later, he was found dead on the floor of his cold water flat. He died in the obscurity of a Parisian slum. Dominique never tried to impress anybody, never wondered if his life was useful or his witness meaningful. He never felt he had to do something great for God, but he did keep a journal. It was found shortly after his death in the drawer of the nightstand by his bed. His last entry is one of the most astonishing things I've ever read. All that is not the love of God has no meaning for me. I can truthfully say I have no interest in anything but the love of God. If God wants it to, my life will be useful through my word and witness. If God wants it to, my life will bear fruit through my prayers and sacrifices. But the usefulness of my life is God's concern, not mine. It would be indecent of me to worry about that. In Dominique, says the author, I saw the reality of a life lived entirely for God and others. And I think that's right what all of us hope to do, to live for God and others. And what does God want? I think he wants two things: to be close to us and for us to help some of his other kids, right? And so to live for God and others, if I'm thinking about myself, if I'm full of myself, I'm not doing that. So hopefully this was helpful as we all strive to be a little less prideful and a little more humble. And that is all I have.